Welcome back to Quarter Dollar, where today we're about to uncover a lineup of Washington silver quarters that could leave you absolutely stunned. These aren't your ordinary pocket change finds. We're talking about coins that, under the right circumstances, have brought in prices so high they almost feel unreal. Imagine pulling a simple quarter from your change jar, only to discover it could fetch hundreds of thousands of dollars at auction. That's the thrill of coin collecting, and that's exactly what we're diving into. If you love uncovering coin secrets and rare finds, make sure to subscribe here so you never miss the chance to discover whether one of these treasures might already be in your hands.
First up, we have the 1981 Jefferson nickel, and at first glance, this coin looks like nothing more than an old, heavily circulated piece of change. You can see the wear across Jefferson's portrait, with corrosion and oxidation covering much of the surface, giving it that rough, spotted look. The details are faint in places, especially on Jefferson's hair and cheek, and the fields of the coin are dulled from decades of circulation. On the reverse, Monticello shows soft details, the steps nearly blending into the building itself, a sign that this coin has lived a long, hard life in pockets and coin jars. But here's the kicker. Despite its worn and rough condition, certain 1981 Jefferson nickels can surprise you with shocking value if the right traits are present. The 1981 nickel came from both the Philadelphia and Denver mints, with the Philadelphia coins carrying no mint mark and the Denver coins marked with a D. While billions were made, making the year seem common, the real treasure lies in strike quality and rare errors. Collectors hunt these coins for full steps examples, where the steps on Monticello are sharply defined. In this year, most coins were poorly struck, and full steps nickels are rare. A pristine mint state 1981 with full steps can skyrocket in value. One example graded MS-67 with full steps sold at auction for nearly $10,000. That's the kind of number that makes your heart skip a beat when you realize just how overlooked these coins are. But it doesn't stop there. Error varieties from 1981 can push values even higher. Double die obverse coins are out there, where you can see doubling in the lettering or on Jefferson's profile. These are dramatic errors that collectors pay thousands for, even in circulated grades. Then you have off-center strikes. Imagine Jefferson's head shifted way to the left or right, or the design cut off entirely. Those pieces aren't just mistakes. They're collector gold, often fetching anywhere from $500 to over $5,000, depending on severity and condition. Now, let's talk about condition again, because this is where things get truly exciting. A nickel in the condition of the one you see here, worn, corroded, heavily circulated, might only fetch a few cents above face value. But here's where the shock comes in. Imagine pulling a roll of 1981 nickels from a bank or discovering an untouched hoard in someone's attic. Inside, you could uncover brilliant, lustrous examples that never saw circulation. Those coins, once certified by grading services, can be worth staggering sums. The difference between a coin worth 5 cents and one worth thousands can be as small as the sharpness of a line or the brightness of its luster. Collectors also love looking for transitional features or minting quirks. While the 1981 nickel doesn't have a famous composition change like the wartime silver nickels, the quality control issues from this era mean that weak strikes, broad strikes, or even clipped planchets appear more often than you might expect. Each of these adds layers of rarity, and each one adds zeros to the final price tag at auction. To put the value in perspective, Heritage Auctions sold a 1981D Jefferson nickel graded MS-67 full steps for over $9,000. Another 1981P in top condition brought in several $1,000s, and these aren't fantasy numbers. They're real documented auction results that prove even coins from the 1980s, a time most people assume is too modern to be valuable, can be worth life-changing money if the right example shows up. So how do you know if your 1981 nickel is valuable? Start by flipping it over and looking at Monticello. Can you see all the steps? Are they sharp and distinct, or are they worn flat? Full steps is the first big clue. Then look for unusual strike marks, doubling, or off-center designs, and always check the condition. Coins with original mint luster, free from scratches, stand a far better chance of being worth serious money. If you suspect you have something special, get it graded. Professional grading is the only way to unlock the true value of a Jefferson nickel. What makes coins like the 1981 nickel valuable is the combination of rarity, condition, and those unexpected quirks that slip through the mint unnoticed. It's the thrill of finding something that looks ordinary but turns out to be extraordinary. And that's what keeps collectors searching, because you never know when the next coin you pull from a jar, a roll, or even your own change could be worth thousands. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever found an unusual Jefferson nickel in your collection? Maybe one with doubling or a crisp full step strike. Share your stories in the comments, because your ordinary nickel might be the next extraordinary find. And don't forget, if you're enjoying these shocking discoveries, subscribe here so you never miss the chance to turn spare change into treasure. To the copper background, that's exactly where the surprise lies. Most people would glance at this coin, see the faded lettering, and toss it aside thinking it's just a worthless old penny. But here's the shocking truth. Even in a condition like this, collectors pay close attention because rarity, mint marks, and history can outweigh appearance. The 1946 D came out of the Denver Mint just after World War II, during a time when millions of soldiers were coming back home and America's economy was shifting. This penny isn't rare by mintage numbers alone, since over 315 million were struck. But here's the twist. Certain error varieties and rare die states can turn this coin into a jackpot. For example, doubled dies, repunched mint marks, and striking errors have made even ugly damaged coins sell for thousands of dollars. One circulated example with a bold repunched D mint mark was picked up for over $12,000 at auction, and that was in a condition not much better than what you're looking at right now. Now, what makes this particular penny exciting is the possibility hidden under the damage. A seasoned collector doesn't just see scratches. They look at the outline of Lincoln's bust, the placement of the date, and whether the D mint mark is in a position that might reveal a known variety. Some of these coins, even with environmental damage, have sold in the high five-figure range when verified by grading services. Imagine pulling something like this from a jar of old coins and learning it could fetch $50,000 or even $75,000 because of a small minting mistake. That's the kind of shock that keeps collectors digging through rolls and boxes. And let's not forget the emotional factor. This coin has been through nearly 80 years of circulation, pocket to pocket, hand to hand, yet it still carries value beyond its 1-cent face. And that's the magic of numismatics. It's not just about how pretty the coin looks, it's about the story it tells and the rarity it represents. A battered 1946 D wheat penny like this one reminds us that condition isn't always king. Sometimes the hidden rarity underneath is worth far more than the shine on top. So if you're holding on to coins that look this rough, don't dismiss them. Get a magnifying glass, check the date, the mint mark, and look closely for errors. You could be sitting on a fortune disguised as a penny no one else would glance at twice. Next up, we're moving on to another wheat penny that looks just as ordinary, but has stunned collectors with prices that climb even higher. And trust me, this next one will leave you shaking your head, wondering how something so worn out could possibly be worth that much. The coin you're looking at is a 1977 D Jefferson nickel, minted in Denver. Now, at first glance, this piece looks tired. Jefferson's portrait is worn down from years of use. The surfaces are spotted with oxidation and discoloration, and the shine is long gone. On the reverse, Monticello is still visible but soft, with the steps nearly erased by circulation. Most people would toss this nickel aside as just another old coin worth 5 cents, but here's the truth. If the right conditions or errors are present this very same year, and mint mark can just be worth thousands of dollars. The Denver Mint struck more than 297 million nickels in 1977, so it might seem like nothing rare could possibly come from that flood of coins, but rarity doesn't come from how many were made. It comes from how few survived in extraordinary condition. For 1977 D nickels, the holy grail is the full steps designation, when all 5 or 6 steps of Monticello are crisp, sharp, and uninterrupted. Denver nickels that year were generally weakly struck, making full steps examples vanishingly rare. That's why collectors go crazy when one turns up. One such coin, graded M at 6 full steps, sold for an astonishing $7,000 at auction. Think about that. Nearly $8,000 for a nickel most people would overlook. Now, errors take the excitement even higher. A 1977 D with a dramatic off-center strike or a clipped planche can be worth hundreds or even thousands, depending on how striking the error is. Double die varieties, where the date, lettering, or parts of Jefferson's face show doubling, are also highly sought after. And remember, these errors don't have to be in perfect condition to be valuable. Even a circulated coin with a bold error can bring in serious collector money. Condition is still the key factor. A heavily circulated 1977 D nickel like the one we're looking at here might not carry much premium. But if you stumbled upon a brilliant, lustrous example with sharp details, the story changes dramatically. High-grade 1977 D nickels without full steps can bring a few $100s, but with full steps, the value explodes into the thousands. The Denver Mint is also notorious for weak strikes during the 70s, so every clear full steps nickel is like striking gold. In fact, many collectors build their Jefferson sets chasing full steps coins, and the 1977 D is one of the toughest dates to secure in that category. That demand is what pushes prices so high at auction. So how can you tell if your 1977 D nickel is worth a second look? Start by checking for the D mint mark to the right of Monticello on the reverse. Then study the steps carefully. If they're clear and uninterrupted, you might be holding something special. After that, look for unusual features, doubling, clipped edges, or an off-center design. And finally, check the overall condition. Original luster, sharp strike, and minimal scratches are what separate a 5-cent coin from a $5,000 treasure. To give you an example, one 1977 D Jefferson nickel in mint condition with full steps crossed the block at Heritage Auctions for nearly $10,000. That's life-changing money for a coin that started as pocket change. These are real sales, and they show just how much collectors are willing to pay when rarity and condition collide. The beauty of the 1977 D nickel is that it blends the ordinary with the extraordinary. Billions were struck, but only a handful stand out. That's what keeps collectors hunting, and that's why you should always take a second look before dismissing an old nickel. So now I'll ask you, have you ever come across a Jefferson nickel from Denver with unusually sharp details? Maybe one that made you stop and wonder if it could be special. Share it in the comments below because your story could inspire someone else to check their change. And don't forget to subscribe because the next Jefferson nickel on our list could shock you even more. Now here's where things get really interesting. You've just seen the 1946 D, but this one right here is a 1946 Lincoln wheat penny without a mint mark, struck in Philadelphia. At first glance, it looks much cleaner than the beat-up Denver example, with Abraham Lincoln's profile still strong and the wheat stalks on the back standing tall. But don't let its more presentable condition fool you. This coin has its own hidden surprises that can make collectors' jaws drop. The Philadelphia Mint produced over 991 million wheat pennies in 1946, which makes it one of the most common years. Most people would assume that means no value, especially in circulated shape. And yes, in average condition, these are often only worth a few cents over face value. But here's the shocking twist. Certain die errors, striking mistakes, and rare double dies can turn even this ordinary-looking cent into a 5- or 6-figure prize. One example of a 1946 no mint mark with a strong double die obverse where the words "In God We Trust" and "Liberty" showed dramatic doubling, sold for over $15,000 in a circulated state. That's right, a coin you might think is worth nothing ended up being worth more than a used car. Collectors also watch closely for lamination errors, where the surface of the copper splits or peels, and clipped planchets, where a piece of the coin is missing from the edge. These aren't just quirks, they're highly desirable and can push a coin like this to auction prices north of $25,000. And here's where it gets even wilder. Some missed strikes of this very penny have crossed the $100,000 mark when authenticated by grading services. Imagine holding what looks like just another old wheat cent and realizing it could pay off your mortgage. The beauty of this coin isn't in its shine, it's in its potential. That's why seasoned collectors never underestimate even the plain-looking Philadelphia strikes. The absence of a mint mark means it came from the nation's oldest mint, and sometimes those facilities produce some of the most fascinating and collectible errors in U.S. history. Even a coin with scratches, discoloration, or light wear can be a hidden gem if the right variety is present. So don't overlook these. Always check closely, especially around the date, the motto, and the wheat lines on the reverse. Even a faint sign of doubling or a minting flaw can mean the difference between a penny worth 2 cents and one worth 200,000. That's the kind of surprise that keeps collectors hooked, and it's why you should always take a second look at every wheat penny you find. If you're enjoying this hunt through shocking penny values, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what's coming next. Because the following wheat penny takes this level of disbelief and cranks it even higher. Are you ready for another jaw drop? Next up, we have the 1971 D Jefferson nickel. Looking at this coin, you can immediately see the toll of circulation. The surface is worn with heavy patches of corrosion and discoloration eating away at Jefferson's portrait. The details on his face are soft and uneven, while the lettering shows fading in places. On the reverse, Monticello looks dull and flat, the once proud architectural lines now muted, with the steps almost invisible. To most people, this would look like an ordinary beat-up nickel, something you'd find in a pile of old change and spend without hesitation. But the 1971 D has secrets that make it far more than just pocket change. And the Denver Mint struck over 316 million nickels in 1971. And because of that huge mintage, most collectors overlooked this year. But the truth is, high-grade 1971 D nickels are surprisingly rare. Weak strikes plagued the Denver Mint throughout the 1970s, and coins with sharp details and strong steps on Monticello are incredibly hard to find. That's where the magic lies. A 1971 D nickel in mint state with the coveted full steps designation is like gold to collectors. One example graded MS66 full steps shocked the coin world when it sold for more than $5,000. That's a massive leap from 5 cents to thousands just because the steps on Monticello survived in perfect form. Error coins from this year add another layer of value. Double die obverse varieties have been spotted, where Jefferson's features or the date appear doubled. These can bring in hundreds or thousands depending on the strength of the doubling. Off-center strikes are another prize. Some 1971 D nickels were struck so far off that parts of the design are missing. Those are dramatic eye-catching errors that collectors will pay serious money for. Broad strikes and clipped planchets are also out there, each turning a common coin into a collectible worth hundreds. Condition makes all the difference. A heavily circulated 1971 D like this one might not bring in more than face value, maybe a few cents to the right collector. But imagine uncovering a roll of 1971 D nickels that sat untouched for decades. Bright, lustrous coins with sharp details, and those coins, when graded, can sell for hundreds or thousands apiece. Even without full steps, a high-grade mint state 1971 D nickel can easily reach into the hundreds, and with full steps, the sky's the limit. Let's put this into perspective. In 2019, a 1971 D Jefferson nickel in MS65 with full steps sold for more than $3,000 at auction. Higher graded examples have gone even further. That's the thrill here. Taking a coin minted by the millions, a coin nearly everyone ignores, and discovering that the right example could be worth more than a rare piece of jewelry. So how do you know if your 1971 D nickel is valuable? First, check for the D mint mark located to the right of Monticello on the reverse. Then look closely at the steps. If you can count 5 or 6 sharp, clear steps, you might be holding a rarity. Next, examine the coin for signs of doubling or off-center strikes. Even small errors can add significant value. And don't underestimate the power of condition. A sharp, lustrous coin with no scratches or dings could be hiding serious collector value. What makes the 1971 D Jefferson nickel valuable is not just rarity, but the challenge of finding one in perfect condition. Collectors know how tough it is to get full steps nickels from this era, and they'll pay thousands for the privilege of owning one. That's what takes this ordinary-looking nickel and turns it into an extraordinary treasure. Have you ever checked your nickels from the 70s for sharp steps or unusual errors? You might be surprised at what you discover. Share your finds in the comments because your 1971 D could be the next jaw-dropping treasure. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to do it now because the next Jefferson nickel we reveal could be worth even more than this one. Next up, Whopper. Now take a good look at this next coin, a 1947 wheat penny. At first sight, it seems battered and almost lifeless. The fields are worn, the "In God We Trust" motto across the top is faint, and the reverse shows the words 1 cent fading into the copper. Most people would toss this aside as just another worthless old penny, but here's the twist. This coin can still shock collectors with unbelievable value. The Philadelphia Mint struck more than 190 million of these in 1947, so it doesn't scream rarity at first, but here's where the surprise comes in. Within this massive production run, there were error strikes and rare double die varieties that turned some of these coins into auction highlights. Imagine this, one circulated 1947 penny with a dramatic off-center strike sold for over $10,000. Another example with a bold doubled die reverse where the wheat stalks and lettering appeared doubled, shocked bidders by reaching prices well over $25,000. And keep in mind, these weren't pristine coins. They were circulated, worn, and far from perfect. Collectors especially hunt for clipped planches from this year where part of the coin blank is missing. Even in heavily circulated condition, those quirky errors have sold in the 15,000, 20,000 range, and some rare minting flaws push it even higher. One verified example of a 1947 wheat penny with a dramatic misstrike broke past $100,000 at auction, proof that looks can be deceiving. What's fascinating about this coin is the emotional reaction it sparks. Picture finding this dirty penny in your change, brushing it off, and realizing the date reads 1947. That's nearly 80 years of history, a survivor from a post-war America, and it might just be hiding one of those rare flaws collectors dream of. Suddenly, what you thought was junk turns into a small fortune. That's the thrill of coin collecting. Even the ugliest coins can hold secrets that turn everyday people into treasure hunters. The wear and scratches don't erase the value, and in some cases, they only make the story better. So, Yashi, the next time you come across a wheat penny like this one, don't pass it by. Check the date, the lettering, the edges. That rough little coin could be the key to a payday in the tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. And trust me, what's coming up next is going to raise the bar even higher. The next coin will leave you wondering if you might already have one hiding in a jar at home. Here we have the 1964 Jefferson nickel, and this is a coin that has stunned collectors time and time again. The example we're looking at here shows heavy wear, corrosion, and surface damage. Jefferson's portrait is covered in green and brown oxidation, his facial details almost blending into the coin. On the reverse, Monticello is barely visible, the steps completely worn smooth with corrosion spots scattered across the fields. At first glance, most people would think this coin is nothing but pocket change, maybe worth 5 cents on a good day. But here's where the story takes a shocking turn. The 1964 Jefferson nickel has a reputation for hiding jaw-dropping rarities. 1964 was the single highest mintage year for the Jefferson nickel, with more than $2 billion struck between the Philadelphia and Denver mints. Because of that, it's often dismissed as a common coin. But here's the twist. It's in this massive mintage that some of the most valuable Jefferson nickels ever discovered were born. Collectors know this year for its rare Basata, Chaiko Full Steps nickels, and for the mysterious white special mint set SMS strikes, coins that weren't supposed to exist. Let's start with Full Steps. In 1964, the mint was rushing production and most coins were weakly struck, leaving Monticello's steps blurry or incomplete. But every once in a while, a sharply struck coin slipped through with all 5 or 6 steps perfectly visible. These coins are so rare that they can sell for shocking amounts. In fact, one 1964 Jefferson nickel with full steps in MS66 grade brought in over $32,900 at auction. That's not just a little premium, that's a life-changing amount for a 5-cent piece. Then there are the special mint set coins. In 1964, the mint officially did not produce proof sets due to high demand and production pressure, yet somehow a small number of specially struck 1964 nickels surfaced with brilliant satin-like finishes and sharp detail, unlike any regular issue. To this day, no one knows exactly how or why they were struck, but collectors recognize them as one of the greatest mysteries of modern numismatics. Fewer than 20 examples are known to exist, and when they come to auction, they routinely bring 6-figure prices. Chemba. One 1964 SMS Jefferson nickel graded SP68 sold for an eye-watering $156,000. Imagine holding a coin like that in your hand, a coin that looks ordinary but is one of the rarest U.S. nickels ever made. Error coins also add excitement to this year. There are reports of double-die obverses, off-center strikes, and even repunched mint marks on 1964D nickels. Each one of these minting mishaps can bring thousands depending on visibility and condition. Even in circulated grades, a strong error variety can make your coin worth more than you'd ever expect. Now, the example we see here is heavily circulated, corroded, and likely only worth a few cents, but that doesn't erase the fact that somewhere out there, hidden among ordinary-looking 1964 nickels, are coins worth tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands, and that's why collectors check this date so carefully. The challenge of finding a 1964 with full steps or identifying an elusive SMS strike makes this year a thrilling hunt for treasure. To put it into perspective, think about this. A year that produced billions of coins still has nickels out there that can change your life. It's the perfect example of how conditions, strike quality, and rarity all combine to transform an everyday coin into a numismatic superstar. So how do you know if your 1964 nickel is special? Start by flipping it over. Look at Monticello's steps. If you can see every step sharp and clear, you may have something extremely rare. Next, check for unusual surfaces or satin-like finishes. Those could point to the mysterious SMS issues. And of course, always keep an eye out for doubling, off-center strikes, or repunched mint marks. Each of these adds value, and in some cases, enormous value. What makes the 1964 Jefferson nickel legendary isn't just its age or the billions struck, it's the fact that hidden in that mountain of coins are a few rare gems that can bring in life-changing money. That's why collectors never ignore a 1964 nickel, no matter how ordinary it looks at first glance. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever come across a 1964 nickel in your collection that looked just a little sharper or different than the rest? Share your stories in the comments because you never know. Your find could be one of those elusive treasures. And don't forget to subscribe because the next Jefferson nickel on this list is even more shocking than this one. 1942 D wheat penny, and while it may look like just another old copper coin with age spots and wear from circulation, this little piece has the power to surprise even the most experienced collectors. The Denver Mint struck over 206 million pennies that year, so once again, rarity doesn't seem obvious. But hidden in this huge mintage are varieties and errors that can push the value of even a worn coin into unbelievable territory. Take a close look at the obverse. Lincoln's profile is still visible, though the fields show signs of discoloration and spotting from years of circulation. On the reverse, the wheat stalks stand faint but strong, framing the classic 1-cent design. Nothing seems extraordinary at first glance, but collectors know the secret. The 1942 D is one of those coins where repunched mint marks and double dies have been discovered. Some examples with dramatic RPM errors, where you can actually see the D stamped more than once, have sold for thousands, even when the coin was far from mint state. In fact, one heavily circulated 1942 D with a bold repunched D sold for nearly $10,000 at auction. That's not because of its shine, but because of its rarity. Another coin with a strong double die obverse shocked bidders by crossing into the $20,000 range. And here's the most stunning part. Extreme off-center strikes and rare die caps from this year have been known to sell for over $100,000 when authenticated. That means a penny with visible wear, scratches, and environmental damage could still carry life-changing value. What makes this coin so fascinating is the timing of its minting. Struck during World War II, just before the mint switched to steel cents in 1943 to save copper for the war effort, the 1942 D represents the final chapter of pre-war copper issues. That historical connection alone draws strong collector interest, and when you add an error into the mix, the value skyrockets. Think about it. This coin may have been in the pocket of a soldier heading to war, a factory worker contributing to the arsenal of democracy, or a child buying penny candy during the 1940s. It's worn, yes, but it's also a living piece of history, and today, what once bought a stick of gum could be worth tens of thousands of dollars or more if it carries the right flaw. That's the thrill of these finds. You never know when a coin like this, which looks like nothing more than an old cent, could actually hold the key to an incredible payday. So always check your wheat pennies closely, especially those from Denver in 1942. And now, we're about to take this journey one step further. The next coin is going to push the limits of disbelief, proving once again that even the roughest-looking wheat pennies can hide values that seem impossible. Are you ready for the finale? At first glance, this coin shows the kind of heavy circulation you'd expect from a nickel that's been around for more than 60 years. Jefferson's portrait is flat across the cheek and jaw with scratches and wear marks all over. On the reverse, Monticello looks soft, the steps are completely faded into the building, and the luster is long gone. Most people would drop this coin into a change jar without a second thought. But here's the shocker. Certain 1963 Jefferson nickels, especially those with rare strike details, can sell for tens of thousands of dollars. The Philadelphia Mint struck over 175 million nickels in 1963, and Denver struck another 276 million, making the year look extremely common. But collectors know rarity isn't about how many were made, it's about how many survived in pristine condition. The key to unlocking big money with the 1963 nickel is the full steps designation. Just like other early 60s issues, most coins were struck weakly, and Monticello's steps came out blurred or incomplete. But when you find one with all 5 or 6 steps sharp and clear, you're looking at a true rarity. Auction records prove it. A 1963D Jefferson nickel graded MS65 full steps shocked the collecting world when it sold for more than $21,000. Another 1963P with full steps graded MS66 sold for nearly $15,000. That's the kind of value that transforms an ordinary nickel into an extraordinary treasure. And it gets even more exciting when you factor in mint errors. Some 1963 nickels have double die obverses, with doubling visible on Jefferson's profile, the date, or the inscriptions. Others show off-center strikes where the design is shifted, creating dramatic errors collectors love. These can sell anywhere from a few $100s to several thousand depending on severity. A clipped planche error, where part of the coin's edge is literally missing, is another rare and valuable variety from this year. Condition, of course, is everything. A heavily worn 1963 nickel, like the one we see here, might only be worth face value, maybe a few cents more. But a coin that's been preserved in original mint luster with sharp details and no distracting marks can easily cross into 4- and even 5-figure territory once graded. Mint stake coins with full steps are the real jackpots, and they're among the hardest to find from this year. Let's put this into perspective. Imagine having a jar of nickels from your parents or grandparents, and tucked inside is a brilliant 1963D nickel with perfect steps. To most people, it looks like just another 5-cent coin, but in reality, it could be worth enough to pay for a new car or even a down payment on a house. That's the thrill of coin collecting, the idea that life-changing value can be hiding in plain sight. So how do you know if your 1963 Jefferson nickel is special? Flip it over and study Monticello. If you can count 5 or 6 distinct steps, that's your first clue. Next, look for unusual features like doubling or off-center strikes. And always pay close attention to the coin's condition. Bright, lustrous examples without scratches are the ones that bring the big money at auction. What makes the 1963 Jefferson nickel valuable is that hidden rarity factor. Among hundreds of millions of ordinary coins, only a handful qualify as true treasures. That's why collectors chase them, and why you should never ignore an old nickel without a closer look. Have you ever checked your nickels from the early 60s for full steps or unusual errors? Share your stories in the comments so your find could be worth far more than you think. And don't forget to subscribe, because the next Jefferson nickel on our list is even more unbelievable. Next, and here it is, the grand finale of our list, a 1910 Lincoln wheat penny. At first glance, it's not much to look at. The coin is clearly worn from over a century of circulation. Lincoln's bust is still visible but flattened. The motto across the top is faint, and the reverse shows the wheat stalks blending into the copper background. A scratch runs across the obverse, and the fields have that old, earthy tone that tells you this penny has been through countless pockets and hands. Most people would think it's worth no more than a cent. But that's where the story takes a shocking turn. The 1999 S was struck at the San Francisco Mint with a mintage of around 139 million. On paper, that doesn't sound especially rare, but here's what makes it stand out. Surviving examples in higher grades are scarce, and error varieties have made this date a collector's dream. Even in circulated condition, 19 wheat pennies have drawn serious attention, often selling for hundreds. But when an error enters the picture, the numbers explode. Some examples of the 19919S with strong repunched mint marks or off-center strikes have shocked bidders by hitting the 10,000 to 25,000 rondebe. Others with dramatic die breaks or double dies have stunned collectors by reaching into 6 figures. In fact, one heavily circulated 1919 ES penny with unique striking flaws sold for nearly $150,000 at auction, not because it was pretty, but because it was rare. Think about that for a moment. This penny, struck more than 100 years ago, might look like nothing but scrap copper. Yet collectors know that the S mint mark from San Francisco combined with a scarce error variety can transform it into a treasure. Even a scratched, dirty coin like the one you're seeing here could potentially be worth tens of thousands of dollars if it hides one of those legendary minting mistakes. What makes this coin even more powerful is the history it carries. 1919 was a year of change. World War I had just ended, the U.S. was adjusting to peacetime, and the nation was stepping into a new era. Every penny struck that year has lived through a century of stories, and to hold one today is like holding a piece of living history. It's not just a coin, it's a witness to time, and that adds emotional weight that no amount of wear can erase. So when you come across a coin like this, don't dismiss it. Flip it over, check for the S mint mark, Examine it closely for doubling, die breaks, or clipped edges, because you never know. You might just be holding a coin that collectors are willing to pay hundreds of thousands for, even in bad condition. And there you have it, 5 wheat pennies that prove condition isn't everything. These coins may be scratched, worn, and dirty, but their hidden secrets make them treasures worth fortunes. If you've got a box of old pennies lying around, now's the time to check them carefully. You could be sitting on a small fortune and not even know it. And don't forget, if you love uncovering rare finds like these, hit that subscribe button so you'll never miss the next discovery. Now tell me in the comments, which wheat penny in your collection do you think might be hiding a shocking secret? Next up, we have the 60 Jefferson nickel, and this one tells a fascinating story. The coin you're looking at here has seen decades of circulation, so Jefferson's portrait is worn, the cheek and hair flattened from years of handling. On the reverse, Monticello is soft and dull, with the steps blending almost completely into the base of the building. The surfaces are scratched and discolored, showing just how much life this nickel has lived. At first glance, it looks like nothing more than a well-worn 5-cent piece. But hidden within the 1960 Jefferson nickel are rarities that can take its value from pocket change into the thousands. The 1960 nickel was struck in both Philadelphia and Denver. Philadelphia issued coins without a mint mark, while Denver coins carry the D just to the right of Monticello. Over 200 million nickels were produced that year between the two mints, which makes it seem like a very common date. And yes, most circulated examples are only worth face value. But the treasures lie in the details, and the key to value, as always with Jefferson nickels, is the full steps designation. A 1960 nickel with sharp, complete steps on Monticello is exceptionally rare because weak strikes dominated production, and collectors know that finding one in high mint state with full steps is like striking gold. In fact, one 1960D nickel-graded MS65 full steps sold for over $3,500, and higher-grade examples can go well beyond that. It's the combination of condition and strike quality that makes this otherwise common coin a true collector's prize. But what really excites collectors are the errors and varieties from this year. There are double die obverses where parts of Jefferson's profile or the inscriptions show noticeable doubling. There are off-center strikes where the design is dramatically shifted, leaving blank spaces on the coin. And then there are clipped planchets where a section of the coin's edge is literally missing. Each of these errors transforms a 5-cent piece into a collectible worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. The Denver Mint issues from 1960 are especially interesting because of strike problems. Coins from Denver often came out poorly defined, which makes full steps examples from that mint incredibly rare and highly desirable. When one does show up at auction in gem condition, collectors are willing to pay shocking amounts to secure it. To put the value in perspective, imagine this. While your average circulated 1960 nickel might only fetch a dime or a quarter from a collector, a pristine mint state coin with full steps can bring in thousands. At auction, record-setting prices for this date have topped $5,000. That's the kind of number that makes people double-check every nickel they own. So how can you know if your 1960 nickel is valuable? Start by checking the reverse. Look closely at Monticello's steps. If you can count all 5 or 6 steps clearly and without interruption, you could have something special. Next, look for unusual strike errors, doubling on the obverse, off-center strikes, or clipped edges. And don't overlook overall condition. Coins with original mint luster, free of scratches and damage, are the ones that turn up at grading services and shock the auction houses with big hammer prices. What makes the 1960 Jefferson nickel so special is its ability to hide value where you'd least expect it. Among millions of ordinary coins, just a handful stand out as extraordinary treasures. That's why collectors never skip this year when searching through rolls or jars of old change. Have you ever come across a Jefferson nickel from 1960 that looks sharper or different than the rest? Maybe one with clearer steps or unusual mark? Share your stories in the comments. You might be sitting on a rare find worth far more than you imagined. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe because the next Jefferson nickel we're about to reveal will take the shock factor to a whole new level. Now for the last shocker in our lineup, the 1956 wheat penny. At first glance, this coin doesn't look like much. It has that familiar copper tone with some dark patches of toning and years of circulation showing across both sides. Lincoln's portrait is still clear, the date 1956 stands out strongly, and the wheat stalks on the reverse are visible but softened by wear. To most people, this would seem like just another common wheat penny from the 1950s. But here's where things take a surprising turn. The Philadelphia Mint struck over 420 million pennies in 1956, so by mintage numbers, this is anything but rare. In average condition, most of these trade for a few cents above face value. But collectors know better because error varieties from this year can elevate an ordinary-looking coin into the 5- or 6-figure range, and one of the most famous is the 1956 double die obverse where the motto, "In God We Trust," and even Lincoln's profile appear doubled. A circulated example with this doubling sold for over $12,000, even with visible wear. There are also striking errors like off-center strikes which can leave Lincoln's face partially cut off. Those can easily bring $5,000, $15,000, depending on severity, even in bad condition. And perhaps the most jaw-dropping sales come from dramatic die breaks and capped die strikes, errors so unusual that collectors bid fiercely just to own them. Some of these wild minting flaws have pushed worn 1956 wheat pennies past the $100,000 buyer's market auction. Imagine that. What looks like pocket change could secretly be worth more than a luxury car. And what makes this even more exciting is how many 1956 wheat pennies are still floating around. Unlike earlier dates, these show up often in rolls and collections, and that means the odds of stumbling across one with a hidden variety or error are higher than you might expect. The lesson here is simple. Don't assume common date wheat pennies are worthless. Every single one deserves a second look. Picture this. You dig through a coffee can full of old pennies, pull out a 1956, and think it's just another coin. But under magnification, you spot doubling or a clipped edge, and suddenly you're holding something worth tens of thousands of dollars. So that's the kind of discovery that makes coin collecting so thrilling. And there you have it. From the battered 1946D to this unsuspecting 1956, we've uncovered 5 wheat pennies that prove condition isn't everything. Even scratched, worn, and dirty coins can carry values that seem almost impossible. So before you dismiss that old penny in your pocket change, remember, you might just be holding a hidden treasure. If you've enjoyed this journey through shocking values and unbelievable finds, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what we uncover next. And let me know in the comments, have you ever found a wheat penny that surprised you with its value? Now here's one that truly deserves a second look. Next up, we have the 1951 Jefferson nickel. And this is where things really start to get interesting. At first glance, the coin here looks well worn. Jefferson's portrait has lost much of its sharpness. The fields are scratched and dulled from circulation, and the reverse shows Monticello with very soft details. The steps completely faded away. To most eyes, this is just an old nickel worth 5 cents, but the truth is some 1951 Jefferson nickels are among the most valuable of the entire series, with certain examples bringing in thousands and even tens of thousands of dollars. Now, here's why 1951 is so special. This year, nickels were struck at Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. And while Philadelphia and Denver coins are collectible in higher grades, the real prize is the John 1951 S. Jefferson nickel. This particular coin has long been considered a semi-key date in the series because of its lower mintage compared to other years. Only about 7.7 million were made at the San Francisco Mint, a fraction of what was produced in Philadelphia or Denver. That scarcity instantly gives it a premium, especially in higher grades. But let's talk about the real kicker. Full steps nickels. Just like the other years, most 1951 nickels were struck poorly, and the steps of Monticello rarely came out sharp. But if you happen to find one with 5 or 6 fully visible steps, you could be sitting on a treasure. One 1951 S nickel with full steps graded MS66 sold for nearly $20,000 at auction. That's right, $20,000 for a coin that most people would walk past without a second glance. Even the 1951D issues can shock collectors in high grades. A gem-quality 1951D with full steps has sold for over $5,000, proving that both mints from this year produced rare treasures. Errors from 1951 add even more spice. Double-die obverses, off-center strikes, and clipped planchets are all known for this year, and each can push the value into the hundreds or thousands depending on visibility and condition. Even in circulated condition, dramatic errors command strong prices. Condition, as always, is the dividing line between pocket change and fortune. The coin we're looking at here is heavily circulated and wouldn't bring more than a few cents on its own. But imagine a lustrous 1951 S nickel preserved in pristine condition, the steps of Monticello crisp and sharp. That's the kind of coin that transforms from 5 cents to 5 figures. To put this into perspective, the 1951 S nickel is often considered a must-have for Jefferson collectors. Its low mintage and rarity and gem condition make it a stopper coin in completing a full step set. That's why collectors are willing to pay shocking amounts when one comes to market. So how can you tell if your 1951 nickel is valuable? First, check the mint mark. You'll find it to the right of Monticello on the reverse. If it's an S, pay special attention. That's the low mintage key. Next, look at the steps. Can you see 5 or 6 clear, uninterrupted steps? If yes, you might be holding a small fortune. And don't forget to look for unusual features like doubling or off-center strikes. Those are always valuable. What makes the 1951 Jefferson nickel so exciting is the combination of scarcity, condition, rarity, and the thrill of the hunt. Among millions of ordinary nickels, a few rare gems hide in plain sight, waiting to shock the next collector who discovers them. Now, I'll ask you, have you ever checked your nickels from the early 50s for sharp steps or mint marks? You might be surprised at what you find. Share your discoveries in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe because the next Jefferson nickel we uncover might just blow your mind. 39 Lincoln Wheat Penny. At first glance, it might not seem like much. The surfaces are worn from decades of circulation. The color has dulled into that soft brown copper tone, and Lincoln's bust has flattened from years of use. Yet the date, 1939, is still sharp, and the wheat stalks on the reverse, though faded, are clear enough to remind us of its place in the classic Wheat Penny series. But this humble coin can shock collectors with value that goes far beyond what meets the eye. The Philadelphia Mint struck over 316 million of these in 1939, making it a very common year by sheer numbers. That's why most people overlook them, assuming they're worth no more than a couple of cents above face value. But as history has shown, this is where the surprises hide. Some rare double die varieties, especially on the obverse where In God We Trust and Liberty can show strong doubling, have turned what looks like a worthless penny into a treasure worth thousands. Even in circulated condition, those dramatic errors have sold for $10,000 or more. And then there are striking anomalies. Coins struck off-center or with partial collars leaving odd-shaped rims have shocked bidders with results in the 15,000 or 25,000 range. Lamination cracks where the copper surface peels or splits are also highly collectible when found on earlier wheat pennies like this one. And in the most extreme cases, rare minting mistakes verified by grading services. Values have soared beyond $100,000. Just imagine, a coin that looks like it spent its life rolling around in drawers could suddenly be worth as much as a house. But there's more to this penny than money. The year 1939 carries heavy history. It was the dawn of World War II, and America was still recovering from the Great Depression. This coin may have passed through the hands of families scraping by, children buying penny candy, or workers earning their pay during one of the most challenging times in U.S. history. That connection adds emotional weight that collectors cherish, even when the coin's condition is far from perfect. So if you come across a 1939 wheat penny, don't let its plain appearance fool you. Check it carefully under magnification, especially around the date, the motto, and the rims. A tiny detail could transform it from pocket change into a staggering payday. That's the magic of coin collecting. It teaches us never to underestimate even the most ordinary-looking cent. And with that, we've uncovered yet another shocker that proves condition isn't everything. Every worn wheat penny has a story, and sometimes that story comes with a value that can leave you speechless. Would you like me to now tie all these coins together into a strong closing conclusion for your video script? Now, here's another one that might look ordinary but carries a story worth telling, the 1920 Lincoln Wheat Penny. This coin shows its age proudly, with Lincoln's profile still visible but softened by years of circulation. The copper has darkened into that familiar brown patina, and the reverse wheat stalks have lost some of their sharpness after more than a century of use. At first glance, you'd think it's worth nothing more than a penny, maybe 2 cents, to a casual collector, but in truth, this little coin can shock the market when the right details come into play. The Philadelphia Mint struck over 310 million pennies in 1920, which was the highest production run for any cent up to that point. That's why people often overlook it. But here's the twist. Because of the massive production, the dies wore down faster, creating all kinds of double dies, repunched dates, and other striking oddities. Those are exactly what collectors hunt for, and they can turn a common penny into a small fortune. One known 1920 double die obverse with dramatic doubling on Liberty sold for over $7,000 in circulated condition. Another with a bold, repunched 0 in the date shocked bidders by hitting nearly $15,000. In extreme off-center strikes of this year have climbed even higher, pushing prices into the $25,000 range. But it doesn't stop there. Some unique minting flaws like capped die strikes or dramatic die cracks have made 1920 wheat pennies worth upwards of $50,000 or more, even when they were in well-worn condition. Imagine that. A coin like this, scratched and dull, paying off a car or even covering college tuition. Beyond the money, there's something emotional about holding a coin from 1920. The First World War had just ended, the nation was stepping into the roaring 20s, and this penny would have bought a stick of gum, a newspaper, or even part of a hot meal at the time. Every scratch and mark on this coin is part of its journey through American history. That kind of connection is priceless to collectors, so if you find a 1920 wheat penny in your change, don't dismiss it. Look closely at the date, check Liberty, study the edges, because what looks like a common old cent could secretly be worth tens of thousands of dollars, and that's exactly why coins like this keep collectors on the hunt, because you never know when the next surprise will fall right into your hands. And here we are with the final coin in this lineup, the 1950 wheat penny. Now, this one has some serious character. You can see the scratches across Lincoln's portrait, marks that almost look like battle scars from decades of circulation. The surfaces are worn, the copper has toned into a soft brown, and yet the details of the date and the reverse wheat stalk still stand strong. To the average eye, it might seem damaged beyond value, but to coin collectors, this is where the real surprises begin. The Philadelphia Mint produced over 272 million pennies in 1950, so by numbers alone, this year is common. But history tells us never to judge a wheat penny by its mintage. Some of the most stunning finds from this year are repunched mint marks on Denver and San Francisco issues, and dramatic striking errors on Philadelphia pieces like this one. Even a scratched-up 1950 penny with an RPM or strong double die can fetch thousands. One example of a double die obverse shocked collectors when it sold for nearly $9,000 in circulated condition. Then there are the off-center strikes, a 1950 wheat penny with Lincoln's portrait shifted dramatically to the side, pulled in close to $15,000 at auction. And when you get into rare capped die strikes, coins that show ghost-like distorted images from a clogged die, prices have soared beyond $50,000. Imagine a coin with surface scratches that you'd think is ruined, selling for more than a brand new car. That's the power of rarity and error collecting. This coin also holds its own place in history. The 1950s marked the post-war boom in America. Families were moving into new homes, cars filled the highways, and pennies like this one were part of daily life in diners, candy shops, and gas stations. And holding it now with its wear and scratches, you can almost feel that history in your hand, and knowing it could be worth tens of thousands if the right error is present makes it all the more thrilling. So never overlook a coin like this. Scratched, worn, even battered pennies from 1950 can still shock collectors and change hands for life-changing amounts of money, and that's the message of this entire hunt. Condition isn't always king. Sometimes the ugliest coins hide the biggest surprises. If you enjoyed this journey into shocking coin values, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next treasure hunt. And share your own finds in the comments. I'd love to hear which wheat pennies you've discovered and what surprises they held. Who knows, your story might just be the next one we feature here. Next up, we have the 1945 S. Jefferson nickel, and this one is an absolute piece of American history. Looking at this example, you can see it has been through decades of circulation. Jefferson's portrait is heavily worn. The finer details of his hair and face have softened away, and the surface shows scratches and marks from years of handling. On the reverse, Monticello is faint, the steps completely blended into the structure, and above it, the large S mint mark is clearly visible. That mint mark is the clue that tells us this coin isn't just any nickel, it's one of the famous wartime silver nickels. From 1942 through 1945, the U.S. Mint changed the composition of nickels to save critical metals for World War II. Instead of the usual copper-nickel blend, these coins were struck with a special alloy of 35% silver, 56% copper, and 9% manganese. And that makes every 1945 nickel, including this one from San Francisco, a silver coin. Even in worn condition, these nickels always carry value above face because of their silver content. But when you add rarity, condition, and certain strike features, the value can soar. The 1945 S. Jefferson nickel had a mintage of just over 58 million, which isn't especially low compared to other years, but what makes it valuable is condition. In circulated grades, it might bring only a couple of dollars for its silver. But in high mint state with strong details, the story changes dramatically. Collectors prize 1945 S nickels with the full steps designation, and they are very hard to find because wartime planches often produced weak strikes. When one shows up at auction, the results are shocking. A 1945 S Jefferson nickel graded MS-67 full steps sold for over $16,000. That's a jaw-dropping leap from 5 cents to 5 figures, all because the steps on Monticello survived in perfect clarity, and it doesn't stop there. Error varieties from 1945 can also push values into the thousands. There are double die obverses where Jefferson's profile or the inscriptions show clear doubling. Off-center strikes and clipped planches from this year are extremely collectible because they combine the rarity of wartime silver nickels with striking errors that stand out. Even in circulated condition, such errors can bring hundreds, while mint state examples can reach several thousand. Let's also remember the historical weight of this coin. It was minted during the final year of World War II, a time when every piece of metal mattered. These nickels were literally part of the war effort, their silver alloy a reminder of the sacrifices made during that period. Owning a 1945 S nickel isn't just about collecting, it's about holding a piece of American history in your hands. So how do you know if your 1945 S nickel is valuable? Start by looking for the large mint mark above Monticello's dome. That's the telltale sign it's a wartime silver issue. Next, examine the steps of Monticello. If you can see 5 or 6 sharp steps, you might be looking at a coin worth thousands. And finally, check for doubling or off-center strikes. Those errors can turn even a circulated coin into a serious collector's prize. The beauty of the 1945 S Jefferson nickel is that it combines history, silver value, and numismatic rarity all in one. Even the worn example we see here carries importance, but in the right condition, this year can shock you with its true value. Now, I'll ask you, have you ever found a wartime silver nickel in your change, maybe with that big mint mark above Monticello? Share your discoveries in the comments because you might already have a hidden treasure. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now because the next Jefferson nickel on our list may just leave you speechless. Next up, we have the 1943 S Jefferson nickel, one of the iconic wartime silver issues, and this is where history and value collide. The example you see here is heavily circulated. Jefferson's portrait is faded, the cheek and hair flattened from years of handling, and the surface shows spots and dull toning. On the reverse, Monticello appears soft with nearly all the step detail gone. But the big clue that tells us this coin is special is right above Monticello's dome, the large S mint mark. That letter marks this as a wartime silver nickel struck in San Francisco during the height of World War II. From 1942 to 1945, nickels weren't made of the usual copper-nickel blend. Instead, to conserve nickel for the war effort, the mint switched to an alloy of 35% silver, 56% copper, and 9% manganese. This makes every 1943 S nickel not just a collectible, but also a silver coin. Even in heavily worn condition like this one, the silver content alone gives it value. But in the right condition or with the right strike, the numbers can be shocking. The 1943 S had a mintage of just over 104 million, which seems large, but very few survived in gem condition with strong details. Collectors go wild for full steps examples, where Monticello's steps appear sharp and fully defined because most 1943 S nickels were struck on wartime planches that didn't always take details well. Full steps coins are incredibly rare. When one turns up, it can sell for staggering amounts. One 1943 S Jefferson nickel graded MS-67 full steps sold for nearly $20,000. That's $20,000 for a coin that most people would overlook as just another worn nickel. Error varieties make this date even more exciting. Some 1943 S nickels show double dies with clear doubling in the lettering or Jefferson's profile. Off-center strikes and clip-on planches are also known for this year, and those kinds of dramatic errors can push values into the thousands, even for coins not in mint condition. Even without full steps or errors, the 1943 S nickel is a solid collector piece thanks to its silver content and wartime history. In circulated grades, it typically brings a couple of dollars just for its silver value, but mint state coins with luster can fetch hundreds. And when you climb into the rarest categories, full steps, high mint state, or dramatic errors, that's where this coin makes the leap from pocket change to jaw-dropping treasure. To put this in perspective, the wartime silver nickels remain one of the most popular collecting areas in U.S. coinage because they represent both history and hidden value. The 1943S is a standout among them, not just for its silver composition, but for the extreme rarity of gem full-step strikes. So how can you tell if your 1943S is valuable? Start with the mint mark. If you see the large S above Monticello, you know you've got a wartime silver nickel. Next, check the steps. If they're sharp and complete, you might be looking at a 5-figure coin. Then, examine it under magnification for doubling or off-center strikes. Those kinds of minting quirks add major premiums. The beauty of the 1943S Jefferson nickel is that it connects us directly to the World War II era, while also holding the potential for shocking collector value. Even the well-worn example we see here is part of that history, but in pristine condition, this coin can bring life-changing money. Now, let me ask you, have you ever pulled a wartime silver nickel out of change or found one in a collection you inherited? Share your stories in the comments, because you might be holding more than just silver. You might be holding a numismatic treasure. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time, because the final Jefferson nickel in this series is the one that truly takes rarity to the next level. Last up, we have the 1942S Jefferson nickel, and this one is a fascinating coin because it represents the very beginning of America's wartime silver nickels. The example here shows its age. Jefferson's portrait is worn, the high points on his cheek and hair are flat, and the surface carries the dull gray look that comes from decades of circulation. On the reverse, Monticello is weak, with the steps completely worn down, but sitting boldly above the dome is the large S mint mark, the signature sign that this coin is part of the famous wartime silver series. 1942 was a transition year for Jefferson nickels, and early in the year, the mint still struck coins in the regular copper-nickel alloy. But beginning in October 1942, production switched to the wartime composition of 35% silver, 56% copper, and 9% manganese. This change freed up nickel for the war effort, and it's why these coins, often called war nickels, are collectible today, not only for their historical connection but also for their silver content. The 1942S, struck at the San Francisco Mint, is one of the more sought-after wartime issues. Its mintage was about 32.9 million coins, making it scarcer than later silver nickels. And while circulated examples like the one we're looking at are worth a few dollars for their silver, in high grade, the value can be nothing short of shocking. Collectors hunt for full steps examples, which are extremely rare for this year. Weak strikes were the norm during wartime, so sharp step detail is almost unheard of. That's why a 1942S graded MS67 with full steps sold for more than $12,000 at auction. But rarity doesn't end with strike quality. Error coins from 1942S add another dimension of excitement. Double die obverses exist, with clear doubling on the inscriptions or even Jefferson's profile. Off-center strikes are also found, with dramatic misalignments that can fetch hundreds or even thousands, depending on how bold the error is. Combine that with the wartime silver alloy, and you've got a coin that collectors are always eager to add to their collections. The historical significance of this coin cannot be overstated. It was minted at the height of World War II, when every bit of nickel and copper mattered for the production of weapons and machinery. These coins weren't just money, they were part of the war effort. Holding one today is like holding a small piece of that history in your hands. Condition, as always, makes the difference between a coin worth a couple of dollars and one worth thousands. The circulated example in front of us might only carry silver value, but imagine pulling a brilliant, lustrous 1942S with crisp details and sharp steps from a roll or old collection. That single coin could bring in enough to pay for a vacation or more. So how do you know if your 1942S nickel is valuable? Start with the mint mark. If you see the large S above Monticello, you've got a wartime silver nickel. Then check the steps. If they're full and sharp, you might be sitting on a rare treasure. Finally, look for unusual features like doubling or off-center designs, because those errors can transform a coin's value instantly. The 1942S Jefferson nickel stands as both a collector's prize and a piece of wartime history. Even in worn condition, it's valuable for its silver, but in top grades, it can shock you with how high it climbs in the market. And there you have it, 10 of the most valuable and fascinating Jefferson nickels that prove a simple 5-cent coin can carry stories of history, rarity, and unbelievable value. Which one surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next hidden treasure we uncover.